It is a very volatile world, and we've seen that with the pandemic and the war in Ukraine and now the earthquake, our world is requiring massive attention across the private sector, across the public sector, and across international organizations, whether they're dealing with humanitarian issues or development issues. So UNICEF is front and center, trying to embark on all these challenges, especially that there's a race against the clock to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And children are at the heart of it. And today, when you see the situation of children with the fact that they have lost a lot of learning, we talk about learning poverty, multidimensional poverty because of the pandemic. Girls and boys out of school, not resuming their education as quickly as we want is a huge issue for UNICEF. So we're paying a lot of attention to really bringing back children in school, making sure they stay in school, and that we help them on a journey from learning to earning so they have a bright future. UNICEF prides itself with a very strong, deep and long-standing relationship and partnership with the government in UAE and a very vibrant private sector. The relations with the government and the private sector go back to many years. We have established ourselves in 1972 in UAE, so UNICEF has been here. At the same time, things have evolved over the past years because of the world we're in and the massive challenges we're dealing with. So we work very closely with the government on humanitarian support to some of the most war-stricken, disaster-stricken countries, whether it's conflict or natural disaster in the Middle East and in Africa. At the same time, we're also looking into working closely with the private sector in UAE, and we have a very strong partnership with DP World, and we look at how we can together pre-position supplies, make sure that they reach disaster-stricken areas as quickly as possible. The latest example is the support of DP World in helping supplies from UNICEF reach Pakistan following the floods there. This global event is gaining more and more attention because it hosts people from across the spectrum of the private and the public sector. So it's not only government officials from around the world, you have CEOs of companies, you have international organizations such as UNICEF and many others who are present here. And this dialogue and networking is critical because we know that any solution will not happen by one entity alone. It's impossible. The challenges are so big. The problems are so wicked. It's really global wicked problems that we need to tackle. That work at the intersection of private and public is required if we are to reach scale, speed, and sustainability. A multilateral approach is key, but also an intentional approach of the private sector, not just in terms of corporate social responsibility, really having the private sector bring their core assets to the table to support government and international organization accelerate the response, whether it's a humanitarian response or a development response. It is a challenge. At the same time, we have seen tectonic shifts happen since the pandemic where the private sector, big companies, whether it's tech or companies engaged in shipping or any other company today is coming and saying, how can we help beyond just, a small donation here? It's beyond that. It's beyond income generation or donations to organizations. It's how can we help with our core assets? What I find very inspiring is we want the private sector to leverage its expertise, its core assets to support international organizations like UNICEF accelerate their response, but also to look at these global challenges from different perspectives and not looking at it from, this is a humanitarian response, this is a development response. We need to think sustainably beyond the immediate emergency. We need to really bridge that gap between humanitarian and development and work in the intersection. This is very interesting. The response will be totally counterintuitive. We do think that sometimes when there is economic downturn, that the solidarity and the generosity of corporates, foundations, individuals around the world will drop. What happens is totally opposite. Actually, what happens in times of economic downturn and crises, and we talk now of polycrises or compounded crises, from natural disasters to armed conflict, to development challenges, multidimensional poverty in many areas around the world. Still, in times of crisis, despite economic downturn, there is a massive movement of solidarity and generosity, and this is very inspiring. How can we have that movement be sustained in times where there's no emergency? Because that's what we need, an intentional approach to resolving those global challenges. I mean, when you see the earthquake in Syria and Turkey, and the fact that it comes on top of so many other difficult situations for people and for children specifically, this is the time where you need to raise attention and awareness. So it's an important opportunity to bring the world around some of our biggest challenges. And one of the big ones that we're all grappling with is climate. How do we deal with climate? Climate will be the number one issue across sectors, across organizations, across the public and the private. We absolutely need to look at climate more than intentionality. We need to adapt our structures, our approach to have climate underpin every single intervention we do. Otherwise, we will not make it. And no organization can deal with this alone.